The sun was shining through the tall glass windows of the company's main building. The staff rushed across the hallways, carrying files and coffee cups, whispering the name everyone respected, Madame Amora. She wasn't just any CEO. She was the face of the empire she had built from scratch. People admired her confidence, her calm voice, and the way she could turn a problem into a plan in seconds. She had climbed every mountain life threw her way, from poverty, from rejection, from loneliness, to become one of the most powerful women in the business world. But behind that strong face, she carried something no one saw: exhaustion, the kind that comes when you spend years pretending to be unbreakable. It was a Friday morning when everything changed. Amora had to give a big speech at a global conference, the kind that could open doors to new investors. As always, she was calm and focused. Her assistant had packed her laptop, her speech notes, and a cup of black coffee. She smiled at her reflection in the mirror of her car before leaving. Strong, perfect, in control. The driver started the car. The city roads were busy as usual. Amora scrolled through her phone, checking emails and ignoring the fatigue in her eyes. A light drizzle began to fall, covering the streets with a thin shine. She didn't notice when the driver suddenly hit the brakes. A truck had lost control ahead, sliding across the wet road. Before she could even think, there was a loud crash. Glass shattered. The world spun. Then, silence. When Amora opened her eyes again, everything was blurry. Her body felt heavy, her legs numb. People were shouting. The car door was jammed. She tried to move, but pain shot through her back like fire. She wanted to scream, but only a whisper came out. Hours later, she woke up in the hospital, surrounded by machines and the smell of antiseptic. Her assistant stood near the bed, tears in her eyes. A doctor came in, calm but serious. "Miss Amora," he said softly, "there's been a spinal injury. You're lucky to be alive." She blinked, confused. "I can't feel my legs," she said. The doctor nodded. "You've suffered paralysis from the waist down, but with therapy and time." His words faded. Amora stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding. Paralysis? She had built a company, faced competitors, handled millions, and now she couldn't even move her own legs. The days that followed were a blur. Her room was filled with flowers, messages, and business cards. Everyone wished her well, but she could sense it, the pity behind their polite smiles. The strong CEO had fallen. The woman who once stood on every stage, commanding respect, was now lying in a hospital bed, unable to move. The first week of therapy was the hardest. A nurse tried to help her sit up, but Amora refused. "Don't touch me," she said sharply. "I can't walk." The nurse tried again, gentle but firm. Amora turned away, tears rolling down her face. She didn't want help. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, weak, broken, human. At night, when everyone left, she stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, her company was running without her. Her office chair was empty, her phone silent. The woman who once had power over everything couldn't even lift herself out of bed. Days turned into weeks. Visitors became fewer. The board sent her polite updates, but she knew what they were thinking. Can she still lead us? In the quiet of her hospital room, Amora replayed her past in her mind. All the time she had pushed people away, choosing work over relationships, success over rest. She had built walls around her so no one could hurt her. But now, those walls had become her prison. She tried to stay strong, but sometimes, when the lights dimmed and the pain medicine wore off, she whispered to herself, "Why me?" One evening, her old mentor came to visit, a gentle woman who had once believed in her when no one else did. She looked at Amora with kind eyes and said, "You spent your life proving you didn't need anyone. Maybe now, it's time to let someone in." Amora didn't reply. She couldn't. Her throat tightened as she turned away, pretending to be asleep, but her heart heard every word. For the first time in her life, she realized strength wasn't always about standing tall. Sometimes, it was about learning how to fall and letting someone help you rise again. Outside her window, rain started falling again, soft and steady. It sounded like hope, like something trying to wash away her fear. Amora closed her eyes, not knowing that the next person who would walk into her room, a quiet man with a calm smile, would change her life forever. Because sometimes the strongest stories don't begin with power. They begin when power is lost and the heart learns how to heal. The days after the accident blended into each other like faded colors. Morning or night, it didn't matter. Amora's world had become a small, quiet hospital room with white walls, beeping machines, and the smell of medicine. Every morning, the nurse pulled the curtains open, letting sunlight flood the room, but Amora barely noticed. Her phone sat on the side table, full of unread messages and missed calls. Once, it used to ring nonstop, business partners, employees, investors. Now it was just a reminder of everything she had lost. Her company was still running, but she wasn't a part of it anymore. The board had appointed an acting CEO. Just until you recover, they said politely, but she could hear the doubt in their voices. In her absence, new decisions were being made, new plans discussed, and for the first time, the empire she built was moving forward without her. She tried not to care. She told herself it didn't matter. But deep inside, she felt replaced, forgotten. Therapy started 2 weeks after her surgery. Every session was the same, a therapist trying to help her move, stretch, sit up, and every time, Amora fought against it. She didn't want to be touched. She didn't want pity. One morning, the nurse came in cheerfully. "Good news, Miss Amora. We found a new physiotherapist for you. He's very experienced and patient." Amora sighed. "I don't need another stranger pretending to fix me." But the nurse smiled. "He's different. You'll see." When the door opened, a man walked in. Simple clothes, warm eyes, calm presence. He wasn't dressed like the others. There was something gentle but grounded about him. He introduced himself softly. "Good morning, Miss Amora. I'm Daniel. I'll be helping with your recovery." Amora barely looked at him. "You won't have to help for long," she said coldly. "I'm not doing this." Daniel didn't argue. He just nodded and began setting up his equipment, a walking aid, a few stretch bands, and a notebook. He spoke with quiet respect, not pity. "I understand, but I'll still be here just in case you change your mind." That irritated her even more. Why isn't he leaving? She thought, but there was something about his calmness that stopped her from shouting. For the next few days, Daniel came every morning. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he just sat silently, reading a book while she stared out the window. Slowly, she started listening. He often mentioned his little daughter, how she drew funny pictures for him, how she laughed at the smallest things. Amora pretended not to care, but she found herself waiting for those small stories. They made her room feel a little less empty. One afternoon, Daniel gently said, "You know, you don't have to rush it. Healing isn't just about walking again. It's about believing you can." Amora turned to him sharply. "You don't understand. I had everything under control. I can't be this person who needs help to move." Daniel looked at her with empathy, not judgment. Maybe it's okay to not have control for a while. That sentence stayed with her long after he left. But despite his kindness, Amora still refused to participate. When he tried to help her lift her leg or move her hands to the chair, she would whisper the same words. "Don't touch me. I can't walk." Her voice trembled every time she said it, as if the words themselves hurt her. At night, she replayed those moments in her head. The truth was, she wasn't angry at Daniel. She was angry at herself for feeling weak, for needing others. She had spent her whole life being the woman everyone looked up to, and now she couldn't even look at herself in the mirror without feeling broken. Weeks passed. Her mentor visited again and brought a few letters from her employees, small notes wishing her strength and recovery. She smiled faintly, but the loneliness in her eyes didn't fade. After everyone left, she looked at the reflection of her wheelchair in the glass window. She hated that thing. It wasn't just a chair, it was a reminder of her limits. Late one evening, as the rain tapped gently against the window, she whispered to herself, "I'm not the same person anymore." Daniel entered quietly, holding a cup of tea. "You don't have to be," he said softly, placing it on the table. "Maybe you're meant to become someone stronger, someone new." Amora looked at him, surprised. "You really think so?" He smiled. "I've seen people come back from worse. Sometimes the people who fall the hardest rise the highest. Something in his tone made her believe him, even if just a little. When he left, she touched the cup he had brought, still warm. For the first time in a long while, warmth spread through her chest too. She didn't know it yet, but this quiet, patient man and his small daughter she had never met were about to change everything. Because healing doesn't always start with medicine. Sometimes it starts with someone simply refusing to give up on you. It had been almost 2 months since the accident. Amora's life had slowed down to a rhythm she never wanted. Therapy in the morning, silence in the afternoon, and memories at night. The nurses had gotten used to a quiet mood. They tried to cheer her up with small talk, but she often responded with polite smiles that didn't reach her eyes. The truth was, she had stopped believing anything could change. Then one morning, Daniel walked in again, calm, steady, and carrying that same warm energy he always did. This time, though, there was something new in his hands, a small paper drawing. "My daughter made this," he said softly, placing it on the side table. Amora glanced at it. It was a childish sketch of a stick-figure woman standing on a mountain with a crown on her head. Underneath it, written in clumsy handwriting, were the words, "The Brave Lady." Amora's lips parted slightly. "Is that supposed to be me?" Daniel smiled. "She likes hearing about you. She says you're brave." Amora looked at the picture again, her throat tightening. "Brave," she whispered to herself. "I don't feel brave." "Maybe not right now," Daniel said, adjusting her pillows gently. "But sometimes bravery doesn't look like standing tall. Sometimes it's just waking up and trying again." His words stayed in the air long after he left that day. For the first time, Amora didn't ask him to leave when he returned the next morning. He began with simple stretches, things that didn't require her to stand. He asked her to move her arms, focus on her breathing, and sit straight for a few minutes without support. She struggled. Every muscle screamed in protest. Sweat rolled down her temples. Her frustration grew, and tears filled her eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered, turning away. Daniel knelt beside her, calm as always. "You can stop for today, but I'll be here again tomorrow." And he was. Day after day, he showed up. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they just talked. Amora learned that Daniel was a single father. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with a little girl who was now 6. Life hadn't been easy for him either, yet there was something about his voice, gentle but full of quiet strength, that made her believe in small miracles again. One morning, while he helped her adjust her posture, Amora asked, "Why do you still come? Most therapists would have given up on me by now." He smiled faintly. "Because I don't see a patient here. I see a woman who once led hundreds of people. I think that person is still in there, waiting to stand again." Amora looked away, her eyes glistening. No one had said something like that to her in months. She started cooperating more. The progress was slow, painfully slow. Every small movement felt like a mountain climb. But Daniel's patience never faded. He would celebrate even the smallest success. When she managed to lift herself slightly from the bed for a few seconds, he clapped softly and said, "See? You did that." It was the first time in weeks she smiled, a real one, but the journey wasn't smooth. Some days, her body refused to move. Some nights, pain kept her awake until dawn. During those moments, her old fears returned. What if I never walk again? What if I never go back to who I was? Daniel seemed to sense it, even when she didn't say a word. "You don't have to be who you were," he told her once. "You just have to be someone new, someone even stronger." Their conversations began to shift from therapy to life. They talked about music, childhood memories, and how success could sometimes feel lonelier than failure. Amora started to realize that Daniel wasn't just healing her body. He was helping her rediscover parts of herself she had buried under years of ambition. One rainy afternoon, the power went out for a few hours. The hospital hallways were dim, and the sound of rain filled the silence. Amora sat near the window, watching drops slide down the glass. Daniel walked in quietly and said, "I brought something." He pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker from his bag and played soft piano music. The sound filled the room, gentle and warm. He said, "This helped me when I couldn't sleep after my wife passed. Maybe it'll help you too." Amora didn't speak for a while. Then she whispered, "It's beautiful." He smiled. "So are you, when you stop pretending to be made of steel." Her eyes met his for a moment, a long, quiet moment that didn't need words. Something changed in that silence. The air felt lighter, her heart steadier. From that day, Amora stopped saying, "Don't touch me." She still struggled. She still hurt, but she began to trust not just Daniel, but herself again. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new one. And in that hospital room, under the soft sound of rain and piano music, two broken souls, a strong woman learning to accept help and a man who had once lost everything, slowly began to heal together. The rain had stopped that morning, leaving the air fresh and cool. Sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, making everything look new, everything except Amora's heart. She had been doing better for the past few weeks. Her arms were stronger, her balance was improving, and she could move from the bed to the wheelchair with less help. But progress can be strange. Some days it feels like flying, and other days like falling all over again. That day was one of the hard ones. Amora had tried a new exercise, one that required her to shift her weight onto her legs. The pain shot through her back instantly. Her hands shook, and her breathing quickened. "Stop!" She cried out, gripping the edge of the chair. "I can't do this." Daniel stepped closer. "It's okay. Breathe slowly." "No," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "I said stop. Don't touch me." Daniel froze, his calm eyes watching her quietly. She hated that look, not pity, not disappointment, just quiet understanding. It made her feel seen, and right now, she didn't want to be seen. She turned her face away, her eyes filling with tears. "You don't get it. I had control over everything in my life. And now, I can't even control my own legs. I feel useless." Daniel took a deep breath, then said softly, "You're not useless, Amora." She laughed bitterly. "Really? Then why can't I even walk to the bathroom without someone holding me like a child?" Silence filled the room. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly felt louder. Then Daniel spoke again, quietly but firmly, "Because healing takes time. You of all people should know, nothing strong is built overnight." His tone wasn't angry, but it carried weight. Amora looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that day. His calm had cracks too, the kind that only people with pain behind their eyes carried. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm just another patient to you." Daniel shook his head. "You're not just another patient. I've seen people give up, Amora. But you haven't, not really. You're angry, you're scared, but you're still here. That means something." She wanted to argue, but her throat closed up, tears spilled down her cheeks, and she looked away. Later that evening, the pain in her back returned stronger. She tried to reach her wheelchair by herself, ignoring the nurse's advice. "I can do it," she whispered, pushing against the bed. But her body didn't respond the way she wanted. Her hands slipped, and before she could catch herself, she fell hard onto the cold floor. A sharp cry escaped her lips. The pain was unbearable, but worse than that was a feeling of helplessness. Moments later, Daniel rushed in. "Amora!" He knelt beside her immediately. "Don't touch me!" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. He didn't move closer, just sat there on the floor beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was her sobbing, quiet, broken, filled with everything she had been holding inside for months. Then, in a voice that was both steady and soft, Daniel said, "I know what it feels like to lose everything." Amora stopped crying for a second and looked at him. His eyes were distant, as if he was seeing something far away. "I lost my wife 5 years ago," he continued. "She was my whole world. One night, she had a heart attack while I was at work. I blamed myself for not being there. For months, I told myself I didn't deserve to be happy. I shut people out, even my daughter." He sighed. One day, she looked at me and said, "Daddy, if you don't hold my hand, how will I walk too?" And that broke me. I realized we heal faster when we stop fighting alone. His voice cracked a little at the end, and Amora felt something shift inside her, a quiet ache mixed with understanding. He looked at her again, gently. You don't have to fight this alone, Amora. Let someone hold your hand, even if just for a little while. Her tears flowed freely now, but this time they weren't just from pain. They were from relief, the relief of being understood. Slowly, she reached out her trembling hand toward him. He didn't rush. He just took her hand carefully, his touch warm and steady. For a few seconds, everything else disappeared. The hospital, the pain, the fear. All that remained was a quiet connection between two broken people who somehow made each other stronger. I'm sorry, she whispered. You don't have to be, Daniel replied softly. Just promise me one thing. Don't give up. Amora nodded, her fingers tightening around his. In that moment, something powerful happened. Not a miracle, not magic, but something real. She didn't stand. She didn't walk, but a part of her that had been numb for months finally began to move again. And for the first time since the accident, Amora didn't feel like a patient. She felt human again. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling with a small, tired smile. Her body was still weak, but her heart felt stronger. Maybe healing wasn't about walking. Maybe it was about learning to let someone walk beside you. And for the first time, she slept peacefully, her hand still remembering the warmth of the one that refused to let her fall alone. After that night, something changed inside Amora. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but quiet, like the way dawn slowly replaces darkness. For the first time since the accident, she woke up with a little hope in her heart. She remembered the warmth of Daniel's hand, his calm voice telling her not to give up. It had felt safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When Daniel walked into her room that morning, she greeted him before he could even say hello. It was a small thing, but his eyes lit up with surprise. Good morning, she said softly. He smiled. Good morning, Amora. How are you feeling today? She took a breath, ready to try again. Daniel didn't say much, but the smile on his face said everything. The next few weeks were different. Amora worked harder in therapy. She stopped pushing people away. Every movement hurt, every stretch boned, but this time she didn't quit. Whenever she felt weak, Daniel was there, steady as ever, reminding her she could do it. One afternoon, she managed to lift herself from the bed into the wheelchair without help. It wasn't perfect. Her hands trembled, her back ached, but she did it. Daniel clapped softly. That's all you, Amora. You did it yourself. She smiled through tears. I did. That small victory meant more than any award or deal she had ever won as a CEO. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about fighting for her life back. Daniel started bringing small pieces of his world into Hayes. Sometimes it was music. Sometimes stories about his little girl. No, a 6-year-old with curly hair and a heart full of sunshine. Amora had never met her, but she felt like she knew her through Daniel's words. He often said, "She keeps me grounded. When I get tired, she just grabs my face and says, 'You can do it, Daddy.'" Amora would smile at that. There was something healing about hearing him talk about love so simple and pure. One day, Daniel walked in with a small surprise. He placed a paper bag on her table. "What's this?" she asked curiously. He grinned. "Lunch. Noah and I made it for you." Amora opened it to find a sandwich and a note written in colorful crayon. "Dear Miss Amora, Daddy says you are very strong. I think you can walk soon." "No." Her eyes softened. She wrote this. Daniel nodded proudly. She insisted, said strong people need encouragement too. Amora touched the paper gently. "Tell her I said thank you." "You can tell her yourself," Daniel said. "She's been asking to meet you." At first, Amora hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready for anyone else to see her like this, sitting in a wheelchair, still struggling. But there was something innocent about the idea that made her say yes. A few days later, Daniel brought Noah to visit. The little girl entered the room holding a small bouquet of flowers, bright daisies, clumsily wrapped in tissue paper. "Hi," Noah said cheerfully. "Are you Miss Amora?" Amora smiled, her heart melting instantly. "Yes, I am." Noah's eyes widened. "Wow, Daddy said you're very brave. I made you something." She pulled out a new drawing, a woman standing tall beside a man and a little girl, all holding hands. Above it were the words, "Stronger together." Amora's voice trembled. "This is beautiful." "No." "Thank you." No smiled proudly. "You're welcome. Daddy says when people fall, they get up stronger. So you'll be walking soon. I just know it." That innocent faith, so pure, so genuine, touched something deep inside Amora. From that day, her motivation doubled. She worked harder than ever, pushing through the pain, refusing to give in to frustration. Daniel guided her every step, patient and encouraging, while Noah's drawing hung on her wall as a reminder of hope. There were days she cried, days she laughed, and days she felt both at the same time. But through it all, she kept going. Daniel noticed a change too. One afternoon, after a particularly tough session, he looked at her and said, "You've come a long way, Amora." She smiled tiredly. "Not far enough." He shook his head. "You're walking on the inside long before your legs will." Those words made her pause. She had never thought of it that way. Later that evening, she sat alone by the window, watching the sun dip below the city skyline. For months, she had looked out of that same window and seen nothing but pain. But now, for the first time, she saw possibility. Maybe this journey wasn't about going back to who she was. Maybe it was about becoming someone new, someone softer, wiser, and stronger in a different way. When she closed her eyes at night, she imagined walking again. Not on a stage, not in a boardroom, but in a park, with the wind on her face, laughter nearby, and a little girl's small hand in haze. And somewhere in that dream, she could hear Daniel's voice saying, "You're not doing this alone anymore." It was strange, but beautiful, the way healing crept in quietly when she stopped fighting it. Because sometimes the real recovery doesn't begin when the body starts moving. It begins when the heart starts believing again. The hospital corridor was quiet that morning. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, painting soft golden lines on the floor. It had been 3 months since the accident, and Amora's world was finally starting to feel alive again. She had made progress, real progress. Her arms were strong now, her posture steady, and she could transfer from the wheelchair to the therapy bench without help. Every day was still a battle, but for once, she wasn't losing. Daniel noticed a change too. He could see it in her eyes, that small spark of determination that had returned. That morning, he entered her room holding a small piece of folded paper. "Remember Noel's drawing?" he asked. Amora smiled. "Of course. Stronger together, right?" He nodded. She made a new one. "This time, you're standing." Amora unfolded the paper slowly. It showed a woman standing tall with her arms open wide, smiling under the sun. At the bottom, Noah had written, "Miss Amora walked today." Amora's voice softened. "But I haven't walked yet." Daniel smiled gently. "Maybe it's time you do." Her breath caught. "You really think I can?" He nodded. "I know you can, but you have to believe it first." She hesitated. The thought of standing terrified her. What if she fell? What if her legs refused again? What if she disappointed herself? And him? But when she looked at Noah's drawing again, something inside her whispered, "Try." They moved to the therapy room. It was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. A few nurses watched from a distance, silently rooting for her. Daniel adjusted the parallel bars and looked at her calmly. "We'll go slow. You won't be alone, okay?" Amora nodded nervously. Her hands gripped the bars tightly as Daniel positioned himself beside her. "All right," he said softly. "Take a deep breath." She inhaled. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Now, let's shift your weight slowly. Don't think about standing. Just feel it." She tried. Her legs trembled. Her body felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled. Her arms shook under the strain. Pain shot up her back, sharp and sudden. She almost gave up. "I can't," she whispered, breathless. "Yes, you can," Daniel said firmly, his voice steady but full of warmth. "You've already fought the hardest battles. Amora, this is just one more step." She closed her eyes. The room felt quiet again, too quiet. All she could hear was her heartbeat. And then, slowly, she pushed against the bars. Her arms lifted her slightly. The strength in her core wavered but didn't fail. Her feet pressed down on the floor, and for the first time in months, she felt them hold her weight. Her knees shook. Daniel moved closer, but didn't touch her. He just whispered, "I'm right here." Amora opened her eyes. She was standing, unsteady, trembling, but standing. Tears filled her eyes. I'm doing it." Daniel smiled, his voice low and full of pride. "Yes, you are. Look at you." For a few seconds, time stopped. The sunlight hit her face just right, and she felt it. Freedom. It wasn't just about walking. It was about taking her life back, inch by inch. She didn't last long. After a few moments, her legs gave out, and Daniel caught her before she could fall. But this time, she didn't cry out of frustration. She laughed, a shaky, teary laugh full of relief. "I did it," she said, still smiling through tears. "You did," Daniel replied. "You stood on your own." That evening, Amara sat by the window, watching the sunset. Everything looked different now, brighter, softer. She felt alive again. The nurses came in to congratulate her, bringing flowers from the therapy staff. Her mentor even called, crying with joy over the phone. But what touched her most was a short video Daniel sent her later that night. No jumping up and down, shouting, "Miss Amora walked. Miss Amora walked." Amora replayed it again and again, laughing through her tears. The next morning, she went back to therapy with a fire in her heart. She practiced standing again, then taking one tiny step. The first time she moved her right foot forward, she gasped in surprise. The next time, she did it more confidently. Step by step, breath by breath, she began reclaiming her strength. One day, during a particularly quiet session, she looked at Daniel and said softly, "You know, I used to think walking meant power, success. But now I understand, walking means gratitude." Daniel smiled. "That's a kind of strength no CEO title can give you." Amora nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're right." There was a moment of silence between them, not awkward, but peaceful. Two souls who had been through storms, now standing in calm waters together. When therapy ended that day, Daniel helped her back into her chair. But this time, she stopped him. "Wait," she said, reaching for his hand. He turned, surprised. She looked up at him and said with a smile, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't." He squeezed her hand lightly. "You did the hard part, Amora. I just walked beside you." That night, as Amora lay in bed, her legs ached, but it was a beautiful kind of pain, the kind that meant growth. She whispered to herself, "I stood today. Tomorrow, I'll walk." And as the lights dimmed and the city outside went quiet, a calm smile spread across her face. For the first time in months, she didn't dream of the past or the fall. She dreamed of her next step. It had been 6 months since the day Amora first stood on her own. The hospital that once felt like a cage had slowly turned into a place of rebirth, a space where she didn't just heal her body, but her spirit. Her therapy was still ongoing, but now she walked with a cane, slow, careful steps, but steps that belonged to her. Every morning, she moved a little faster, stood a little straighter, and smiled a little wider. The day she was discharged, the staff gathered at the entrance to say goodbye. Some clapped, some cried. Daniel stood a few steps behind, hands in his pockets, smiling with quiet pride. "You made it," he said softly. Amora laughed, brushing a tear from her cheek. "We made it." He tilted his head. "No, Amora, you did this. You believed again." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "Only because someone reminded me I still could." For a moment, they just stood there, two people who had walked through pain and found healing in each other's presence. Then Amora took a small, shaky step forward and said, "I'll never forget what you did for me, Daniel." He smiled. "Just promise me you'll keep walking." She nodded. "Always." A few weeks later, Amora returned to her company. The building looked the same, tall glass walls, polished floors, and busy people rushing through meetings. But she wasn't the same woman who had left it months ago. When she entered the main lobby, silence filled the room. Employees who had only known her as the untouchable CEO now watched as she walked slowly with a cane, every step filled with quiet power. Her assistant ran up, eyes brimming with tears. "Welcome back." Amora smiled. "Thank you. It's good to be home." The board had organized a special meeting to discuss the company's future. Everyone expected the same sharp, strict leader to return, but they were about to meet someone entirely new. When she walked into the conference room, she could see the surprise on their faces. Some tried to hide it. Others looked unsure. Amora placed her cane beside the table, straightened her back, and said in a calm, confident voice, "Before we start talking about profits and growth, I want to talk about people, the real strength of this company." The room was silent. She continued, "I've spent months learning what strength truly means. It's not in how fast we move or how powerful we look. It's in how we lift each other when we fall." Her voice softened. "From today, I'm starting a new division, a foundation to support people with disabilities, helping them find work, confidence, and dignity, because everyone deserves a second chance." There was a long pause. Then, one by one, people began to clap. It started soft, then louder, until the entire room was applauding. Amora smiled, not the tight, business-like smile she used to wear, but a genuine one that came from deep inside. After the meeting, she walked out of the building and sat on the bench outside, watching the sunset paint the city gold. For the first time, she felt peace, not the kind that comes from success, but the kind that comes from acceptance. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Daniel, Noah wants to know if a brave lady can come visit us this weekend." "Amora, tell her the brave lady would love to." She smiled at the screen, her heart warm. That weekend, Amora visited Daniel's home for the first time. It was small but full of life, children's drawings on the fridge, laughter in the air, and the smell of fresh cookies. Noah ran up to her the moment she entered. "Miss Amora, you're walking." Noah shouted excitedly. Amora laughed, kneeling carefully to hug her. "I told you I'd try, didn't I?" Noah grinned. "Daddy said you're the bravest person he's ever met." Amora looked at Daniel, who stood in the doorway, smiling quietly. "Your dad gives me too much credit," she said playfully. Daniel shook his head. "Not enough, actually." They all sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and tea. The sound of joy filled the room, simple, beautiful, real. As the evening light faded, Noah drew another picture, this time, of 3 people walking hand in hand under the sun. She proudly showed it to Amora and said, "See? You're not alone anymore." Amora's eyes softened. "No, sweetheart," she whispered, "I'm not." Later, when she stepped outside, Daniel walked her to her car. The air was cool, the stars just beginning to appear. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. You didn't just help me walk again, you helped me live again." Daniel smiled gently. "You help yourself, Amora. I just reminded you how strong you already were." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Still, I'm glad it was you who reminded me." They stood there, a calm silence between them, not needing promises or explanations. Just peace. As she drove away, Amora looked at the city lights glowing in the distance. Months ago, she had looked at them and felt trapped. Tonight, they looked like possibilities, countless, shining, endless. She touched the cane resting beside her seat and smiled. She wasn't just walking again. She was moving forward, one step, one breath, one new beginning at a time. Because sometimes, strength isn't about standing tall after you fall. It's about learning that even broken wings can fly again if someone believes in you enough to hold your hand when you can't. And that was exactly what Amora had found. Not just a strength, but a hand that never let go.